emerged between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago, there is no record of the event. This is a religion. This is a tax-funded religion. And they're teaching this stuff to our kids. What about radioisotope dating? Let's take a quick look at this. Now this part here, hopefully this doesn't intimidate you. I don't want your heads dropping off. I'll try to explain this as best I can. I've given this talk. I gave it, one time I was at this part in a rest home and half the people were asleep. But that was okay, they were asleep before I even started the talk. So with radioisotope dating, there's assumptions built in. Basically how they measure how old something is something like potassium decays into argon. It's radioactive, certain types of potassium. And over time, it's spitting off particles, and it turns into argon. And if you know the rate that it does that, it's like an hourglass. You can use it as a time clock. The problem is there's assumptions built in. So let's look at these. And before I go through all these, let me give you an example, an analogy. Imagine you came into this talk, and you saw a big stack of papers all wadded up. And you noticed, and I asked you to notice this. I say, notice how often I'm doing this. And so once a minute, you noticed every time the hour clock was at the minute mark, I threw it into the trash can. I did this for 10 minutes consistently, once a minute. Now I ask you, okay, how long have I been doing this? So how would you tell how long I've been doing it? Is there a way you can tell? Yeah, go into the trash can and count how many wads of trash there are. So what if there's 20 wads of trash? How long have I been doing it? 20 minutes. No radioactive daughter elements present at the start. What if the janitor the night before didn't quite do his job and there's 5 in there? You just dated this system older than it is. You told me I've been doing it for 20 minutes. I'd only been doing it for 15 minutes. Because you made the assumption that the trash can was empty. No loss or gain of daughter or parent elements. What does this mean? What if the trash can's over here and no one noticed that Ed is throwing pieces of trash in the trash can? That would be loss or gain of parent elements. This is actually the number one excuse evolutionists give when they don't get a date they like. They excess argon. Argon leaked into the system and threw off the dates. And then finally, there's other assumptions, but these are the big 3. Constant decay rate. How do you know before you came in here I didn't rapidly fire in 10 pieces of trash? If I had done that rapidly, you would have told me I did it for 20 minutes, and I'd only done it for 10 minutes and 2 seconds. This is an interesting admission from an evolutionist. There has been, in recent years, the horrible realization that radio decay rates are not as constant as previously thought, nor are they immune to environmental influence. And this could mean that the atomic clocks are reset during some global disaster. We know that pressure and heat can change these decay rates. And events which brought the Mesozoic to a close may not be 65 million years ago, but rather within the age and memory of man. Consider these rocks where we know the age. Like we've got rocks from Mount St. Helens. They're brand new rocks. But when we date them, we get dates anywhere between 0.35 and 2.8 million years. When we date rocks from Hawaii, we get anywhere from 0 to 22 million years. From another volcano in Hawaii, we get anything from 160 to 3.3 billion years old. So here's the point. If we can't trust the dates of rocks where we know the age, why are we expected to trust the dates where we don't know the age? Here's another admission by an evolutionist. It's obvious that radiometric techniques may not be the absolute dating methods they are claimed to be. Age estimates on a given geological stratum by different radiometric methods are often quite different, sometimes by hundreds of millions of years. There is no absolutely reliable long-term radiological clock. Here's out of another high school textbook. In the last 2 years, an absolute date has been obtained for the Nagadon beds above the Trino beds, and it has a very interesting value of 300,000 years, plus or minus 300,000 years. That's their absolute date. This is in our high school textbooks. What are they teaching our kids? That's why it's important to come to these meetings, so that you can educate your friends, your family, your cousins, your nieces, your nephews. This is a religion they're teaching in public schools, a secular religion. And if you look at all the clocks that we can look at, scientific evidence actually heavily favors a young world. And I'm going to show you just a few examples. And by the way, these put an upper limit on the age. It doesn't necessarily say the Earth is a certain age, but it puts an upper limit on it, which says that it can't be millions of years old. So this is an interesting one. Galaxies wind themselves up too fast. We know from Newton's laws that you get faster rotation and slow rotation on the arms of the galaxies. Here's the problem for a billions of years universe. Over time, this thing should wind up like a clock screw and be pretty much a featureless disk. Yet we see these guys with spiral arms no matter how far out we look into space. It's a serious problem for evolutionists, and when we had a debate that Bob Enyart was involved in with the Reasons to Believe group here in Denver, we brought this argument up, and they had an astrophysicist on their side, and he couldn't answer this. They just skipped the problem. Here's one on DNA rates. Mitochondrial DNA, which is kind of the powerhouse DNA, it's a separate DNA from the DNA in the cell, appears to mutate much faster than expected, prompting new DNA forensics procedures and raising troubling questions about the dating of evolutionary events. Regardless of the cause, evolutionists are most concerned about the effect of a faster mutation rate. For example, researchers have calculated that mitochondrial Eve, the woman whose mitochondrial DNA was ancestral to that in all living people, lived 100 to 200,000 years ago in Africa. So they had done some original dating, but they didn't have very many samples, so they came up with a really bad date of 100, 200,000 years. It actually pointed to like someone they called Eve, but they were okay publishing it because it was 200,000 years old. That contradicts the Bible. They were happy with that. But when they got more data in, a pile of data in, probably orders of magnitude data in, what they found out with the new clock, she would be a mere 6,000 years old. That sounds awfully familiar. Are they teaching our kids this? This is my favorite. Helium diffusion and zircon. So granite has these crystal zircons, and inside of them they found helium. Helium's a noble gas, so it's real slippery. What's helium doing in these rocks that they're billions of years old?